Hi, everybody. It's Jim Carroll at Converge Digest and NextGenInfra.io, and I'm here with Larry Lunetta of HPE Aruba Networking.
Hey,
Hi, good to see you again.
absolutely.
So we're here to talk about all things networking, wireless networking, security, autonomous vehicles. So yeah, sit back and relax and let's enjoy this Waymo ride through the busy streets of San Francisco.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful day out. It's a great time to go sightseeing and talk about technology.
Yeah, first off, we just have to say something about this amazing vehicle. I mean, look at this. It's self-driving with heavy traffic, city traffic, and seems to know its way.
It does, and it seems to get better. Like even over the last couple of days, I've seen the driving become much more like New York than than laid back California City, which sometimes is good. And to your point, what's amazing about this is, the Computer History Museum in Mountain View has one of the early prototypes of Waymo. It was custom built, called the Firefly. It was a two-person car. That was done in 2016.
Yeah.
So in 9 years, we now are here with this complex, incredibly difficult to execute technology and solution.
Right. That's why we love the tech industry and the networking industry. Is it incremental progress, step by step, getting better every year. Just think about all the technologies that had to come together for doing this.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the culmination of this, you talked about evolution. The culmination of this is a revolution. Right?
Mm-hmm.
This is going to materially change the way we think about transportation.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's kick off the networking angle to this then. All of these systems, autonomous systems, whether it's a self-driving car or soon drones, everything, obviously rely on the network, and it's what you guys are famous for. You've been working on for a long time, especially the wireless part of that network.
Yeah. So and we're known as a security first networking provider, right? It's been in our DNA. We've from almost the beginning of the company back more than 20 years ago. Security has been a hallmark of what we deliver, and we continue to do that. And it's for the reasons you talked about. The stakes keep going up, right?
Right.
A compromise in a car like this, and it's not just the connection to the car, it's what happens behind the scenes in the cloud.
Right.
Right. So a compromise there not only affects one vehicle, it could affect the whole fleet, right? So, we spend a lot of time, as you said, making sure that the wireless connection is secure, that access control is appropriate.
Right.
And that, if there is an attack, we can deal with it quickly along with the security team and reduce the impact.
Right. So, talk to us a little bit about that. It must be a kind of a first principles engineering exercise, right? To really think about, all right, now you're going to have an autonomous vehicle, lives are at stake. How do you go about ensuring that you're not going to have those kind of compromises?
So we have a role.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have the whole role because a lot of this connectivity is done outside of a local network, for example. But what we do is make sure the engineers, the operations team, et cetera, those who design and implement and manage this service, are not compromised, that they're delivering the service appropriately. And that's where access control comes in. We've had a long history of making sure that only the right permissions are available based on your role in the network and in operations. And essentially what that means is the network will police the policies that are defined by the security team.
Right.
And increasingly, the networking team and the security team are coming together. They're working together. They're more collaborative. It used to be networking was about the yes and security was about the no.
Yeah.
Well, organizations can't tolerate that anymore, and everybody knows that. So we're building in policy and access controls that both organizations can work on, can collaborate on, and then, as I said, get natively enforced in the network.
Right. So we're about a minute, 2 minutes into this conversation, and we have not used the two letters that we must. But I think now is probably the time that we should start mentioning AI, because it is something that not only is driving this vehicle, but increasingly in your platforms as well. You're adding in features, and so Talk to us about that evolution.
Long history of using AI to help optimize and manage the network. And networks continue to get complex, more moving parts, it's remote work all the way to the cloud. And AI is essential to help the networking team, keep the network up and running, reduce the manual effort, et cetera. So, we talk about networking for AI and AI for networking. So the networking for AI piece is really the mission of the network is to capture, secure, deliver data where it needs to go, wherever the application or the user is attached. Right. So AI, the network, facilitates that, and increasingly AI is done in the cloud. It's done in data centers. It's done at the edge. So you can see that the role of the network is essential to making that successful. If you turn that around and you say AI for networking, then you have this issue of troubleshooting, optimizing, the daily management that AI can help with. And we have continually introduced more and more AI into the workflows so that, troubleshooting is reduced by 75%. We can get 25% more performance out of the network just by making recommendations to change the settings. Right?
Okay.
And we continue to introduce agents that are based on AI into the network fabric. And those agents are very focused on specific tasks. So you can see where this is going, right? Where these agents ultimately will aggregate and federate and deliver to the networking team a much more precise and consolidated view of network operations, and especially if there's a problem, how to fix it.
Are there any of these agents now that you have that are particularly impactful to the customers?
Yeah, I think a couple. I'll give you one example. It's always a question of when do I update my firmware? Right? Based on, you're always a couple revs back. You're always reluctant. You want to test it before you go. Because we have such a huge data lake, and we see, the switch configurations, for example, across thousands and thousands of customers, we can look at a customer's network and say, look, given all of this, given the security patches that have been introduced and things like that, here's what you should do. You should upgrade to this firmware. And it's been very successful. I mean, the customers continue to trust the efficacy of the AI.
Okay. And do you see it like evolving to the point where it becomes more like this car where you're completely letting go and say, go for it?
That's the holy grail, right? That's the $1 million question. And I think the answer is you have to look at it from two perspectives. Right? The technology is rapidly getting to the point where it's possible. Not completely. It's not like totally autonomous like this car, but effectively, much of the daily operation of the network and the updating and the changes that are made, AI can have an influence and, in fact, make those changes.
Right.
But it's kind of like when I told some friends I was going to have this ride with you, and I told them it was a Waymo, they said, "What? You would trust yourself to be in a car with no driver?" So it's the same with the network. So it's a matter of culture and gaining that level of trust that you will allow the AI to do what it can do.
Right. So obviously we've been in this game long enough to know that it's the customer that ultimately matters, right?
Correct.
And so what is the customer's challenges that you see now that they're asking you to solve with all this new technology?
So we recommend, there's the phrase trust but verify.
Yeah.
We recommend trust and verify. So to get started with this idea of autonomy and using AI as a network administrator, use the AI. What we have now is we'll make a recommendation. So take the recommendation, use your judgment, implement it, and then document what the response is, right? And that way you can continually build up this trust profile into the AI. So it's a matter of overcoming some of the cultural hurdles. So that's one challenge. The second challenge, as I said, is getting the security and networking teams to work together, right?
Yeah. So those are people issues more than the technology issues, I suppose, right?
Well, technology can help, as I said.
Yeah.
When we build tools now into the networking workflow, they're really security solutions, but the network administrator doesn't have to know the under the cover security policies and that sort of thing. They stand up a switch or a gateway or an access point, and the security policies come along with the workflow.
Okay. All right. Let's talk a little bit more on the innovation side, the R&D side,
Yeah.
and the cycle. So I've seen you guys are introducing all kinds of new products or new services, new features
Right.
on your platforms, which kind of speaks to the pace of these updates and changes. Is that driven by AI at this point, or
To some extent it is. We continue to use machine learning, which some people would say, well, it's not Gen A, et cetera. Well, there's still a role for machine learning, and we use it for behavioral analytics.
The data lake.
Data lake, we learn from the data lake, and then we look at things like, for example, IoT devices, which are very hard to find, very hard to fingerprint. So based on our data lake, we can use what we see in real time to identify what that device is and assign a policy.
Right. So for those who don't know what we're talking about here about the data lake, can you explain how that is that you guys created and where it comes from and what the limits are?
So one of the key themes now is telemetry.
Don't forget your phone, keys, or wallet.
So the telemetry is what feeds the data lake, and the telemetry comes from our network devices and the devices that are connected to the network. And we get terabytes of data from thousands of customers and millions of devices every day.
Right.
And sort of the rule of AI is the more data you have, the better the AI is, right?
Right, exactly. All of the big LLMs are with that question of where are you training, where are you getting the data.
Yeah, so our advantage is because of the size of our customer base and the telemetry we generate, we don't have to go outside to train our models. So, our models aren't going to the internet looking for information. It comes simply from what we capture ourselves.
Okay.
And that's a huge competitive advantage for us, and it's a huge advantage when it comes to, the efficacy, as I said, of AI.
Right.
So the machine learning will do behavioral analytics, and what behavioral analytics are is simply looking at, the operation of a particular part of the network and establishing.
We'll continue here in just a moment.
Yeah.
Make sure we resume that right. Okay, yeah, the behavioral analytics.
Yeah, so behavioral analytics is simply watching the telemetry in the network, understanding what's normal, and then looking for aberrations. And we can do that with a high degree of reliability. So, we can do that looking for devices that are perhaps compromised and acting strangely. We can do that, for example, we built in a denial of service solution in our WAN gateways, and that uses AI as well. So we look at the WAN traffic and we know what's normal. If we see unusual spikes, we can throttle the traffic, we can block the traffic. So that's a combination of AI and security that delivers, a result.
Right. So the next thing I'd like us to talk about a bit is moving this forward, like thinking 5 years ahead, 2030. I mean, look at the streets of San Francisco. We have Waymos now where we see them almost on every street, but we can imagine 5 years from now there's 6 or 7 competitors in the field. It's going to be like that picture of New York City. I'm sure you've seen that 1910 it's horses, and so many years later it's only cars, right? And of course there'll be drones and there'll be humanoid robots, and they'll all be living on this wireless network.
Yes, and all living off data, all living off telemetry, and all living off trust, right? In 5 years this will be, a normal exercise, right? No one will ever think twice about this. So, that's, the picture you painted is sort of how society is going to evolve. From a technology standpoint, AI continues to get better and better and better. And in fact, I'd say if you look at the pace of Gen AI and now agentic AI, it's exponential. And I don't know how given the task that it has, how it could be exponential.
It's moving so fast. It's crazy.
It's huge amounts of money going in, to fund, the innovation. So that's just everybody's going to have to run to catch up, right?
Yeah.
But it's going to open up huge opportunities.
Yeah, and so for a company like yours, how you position for that future?
So it's interesting. Hewlett Packard Enterprise, of course, has a very broad portfolio:
Hmm.
servers, storage, hybrid
Hmm.
cloud, networking, right? And one of the things that's driving our innovation is this idea of security, resilience, and compliance. And I gave you some
Hmm.
examples from a networking perspective.
Right.
How we support that. We have a very excellent hybrid cloud management capability where the on-premise equipment, the servers, the storage, the network is managed from the cloud. But there's an EU rule called DORA, which is Digital
Yes.
Operations Resiliency Act. And as a result of that, for example, financial services organizations need what we've now delivered, which we call the digital circuit breaker.
Uh-huh.
And if there's a security issue detected, the security team can, in essence, disconnect what's on premise from the cloud. It will still operate
Right.
and the workloads will still function, but the security team will get some time to figure out what's happening and remediate whatever they need to remediate. And then you can reconnect to the cloud and continue your operations.
Yeah,
Um,
which seems highly relevant, even with incidents that we've just seen recently.
exactly. Another example of this idea of security, resilience, and compliance, has to do with universal ZTNA. That's a
Uh-huh.
trend that's coming, right?
Right.
So one policy applies to applications and users and devices, no matter how they connect.
Right.
We're very close to that, not quite there yet, but we have all the pieces that we're putting together to enable, that kind of exercise. And one last kind of future thing, people are
Uh-huh.
starting to talk about quantum computing, right?
Right.
And one of the challenges with quantum computing is the idea that it can crack all the current encryption, that exists.
Right.
So our servers, we just introduced servers that have post-quantum cyber security
Interesting.
cryptography capabilities. So we've started to introduce encryption that will be resilient when it comes to being cracked by quantum computing.
Yeah. So you guys, of course, work with a whole range of industries. You mentioned financials. Is that post quantum discussion being driven by any of these industries in particular? Do they come to you guys and say, "Hey, this is what we're looking at," or is this kind of from the engineering lab on out?
I think it's a meet in the middle kind of a thing, right? We're very customer centric. We listen to our customers. We hear what their concerns are. It's not a here and now,
Yeah.
right? So that's why the lab is actively involved in pioneering some of this. But in our business, sometimes you have to look over the horizon, and even if customers are not, actively concerned about it,
Right.
they're going to get there, and
Right.
and it is going to be financial services, healthcare, those kinds of organizations where the data is so sensitive.
I know we just have a couple minutes left here in our ride, but you mentioned trust a couple of times. How do you put that into the overall vendor landscape?
It's a great question, and especially in the security landscape, we hear it repeatedly about vendor overload. I mean,
Mm.
if you go to a show like RSA, there's literally hundreds
Hmm.
of vendors trying to attack certain types of security issues, and what our customers are demanding is fewer vendors, more secure platforms, and they're
Hmm.
challenging, someone like HPE to build security into networking, build
Right.
security into the servers, build security into storage, and we love that kind of challenge because we believe that's an advantage for us.
Okay. All right. Great. It's quite a dynamic space that you're in, for sure. So I'm sure this next year in technology evolution will feel like 10.
Yeah, it's going to be a different kind of a year from a number of perspectives, but I think technology marches on. If you look at the history of computing and technology, we've always faced these challenges, right?
Right.
What's going to happen to society, what's going to happen to our jobs, what's going to happen to our life, and we've always thrived. And I have a lot of confidence we'll continue to do that.
Yeah, and so do I. And I think that regardless of all these waves of technology that we see coming, business is still about humans,
Yes.
humans to humans, and so we certainly can't discount the human element.
Yeah, I agree 100%. In fact, when I describe my Waymo rides, I keep, saying he did this, and it's just a car, right? There's
right,
no he,
right.
But we translate many things into human terms.
Well, thanks for joining me on this ride. It's been fun.
Absolutely. Thank
Really
you, Jim. Appreciate the opportunity.
All right, thanks, Larry.
And it's great that we got here safe and sound.
That's right. That's what counts.